Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
My name is Dan.
and the game week review is back. Another season, and it's kicked off with a bang. There's lots to talk about in this episode, but most importantly, sort of Gaffr's back, the games are back, the drama is back, all that good stuff. And we're going to dive into a lot of it on this episode. But first things first, Dan, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, Angus. Good week of football. Um, a lot of interesting games in the Championship, and Luton won. So we're, we're getting closer to getting back into the Championship. But yeah, good week. It's always hard in the first few games because the window's still open, so it takes a while for things to settle down. But yeah, overall, pretty entertaining week in the Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the way this transfer business can happen, I'm going to timestamp this that it is currently 9:28 on Monday night. So if something big happens, particularly between us recording and you listening, that is why. Um, but yeah, so we'll follow the same format that we've followed before. For those of you that are new here, we'll sort of go through how we did this game week. Dan will run through the key sort of team news from the weekend's games. We'll sort of go through and review a number of the sort of more significant games, whether that's because of what happened or it involved significant teams. And then we'll sort of touch on any sort of thoughts from the remaining games and then answer questions. So I'll jump in first, in part because I know I did slightly worse this week. I got 59 points, which I'm not too unhappy with, particularly the way certain games went against me in terms of who I had picked. Um, a Kaminsky in goal for 9. So obviously that went quite well. And the fact that he jumped with Charlton's last second winner, he jumped from 6 to 9 points. Was quite nice. Um, Furlong and his red card 3, Cresswell 4, Burrows 1, Davis 5. Funnily enough, my highest scoring defender was Shaughnessy from Portsmouth, and I had him on the bench with 6. In midfield, I had Silvera for 2, Rudoni for 3, El Canous for 14, Fatawu vice captain for 6, Mavadidi captain for 4, Hegabo up front for 8. On the bench, I also had Pandora's 11, Olafe's 1, and Reese's 6. I've seen a lot worse benches than that, and realistically, I look at Pandora as essentially a 2, given that Kaminsky got 9 in terms of how much it's missed out on. But yeah, not the worst start, not the best start. It was looking worse before the Leicester game. Getting some points there, obviously, I knew would make a big difference. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm looking at probably at least one player needing replacing. Which, given that Furlong also got sent off, El Canoes potentially leaving, I'm probably going to need to make a transfer. But that's always a possibility in the early game weeks, and I knew that going with El Canoes in particular, that I might have to make a transfer right away. So it doesn't disrupt things too much for me. But yeah, that's how I did. Sort of comfortable with the start, while sort of a slightly underwhelmed, but it's just about not having shockers early on, really. How did you do this week, Dan?
Yeah, so I got 60, um, Kaminsky 9, Doughty 11, Giles 9, Burrows 1, Davis 5. I captain Mavadidi for 4, vice captain Radoni for 4, Fatawu for 4, and Fellows for 3. I Hegbo up front with the Watford striker who I can't pronounce. Jerome Guard, correct? Yeah, not too sure. Yeah, he didn't do anything anyway, so I think he got 2 points. Like yourself, I had Panda on the bench from Hull for 11. I had Shaughnessy, I had Kelman, so the other Charlton striker, he done slightly better with one more point. And I went for Sheffield Wednesday's young centre mid, Fusir, who wasn't even first choice, so that's not looking like a great pick, especially when Chalobah actually returned this week. So yeah, overall, I think it's a solid week. I really struggled to put the team together this year. I thought there were like lots of pretty similar players. At some points, I had players that scored quite well this game week. I had a Davis draft and a no Davis draft, and I preferred the no Davis draft. So in the end, I sort of done a bit of a mix. And yeah, overall, I think I'm set up okay. But I might take a -4. It depends what happens. I don't need too much of a reason to take out a Watford player, let's put it that way. But yeah, overall, pretty happy. I think it's a solid game week. It's not spectacular. There was a few boosts flying around, so yeah, solid but not spectacular, I think.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think it's one of those things. I think particularly with a number of boosts flying around, it's working out how exactly you feel, particularly in contrasted with some of those. But I think just sort of being on the board and sort of thinking ahead, I know there'll be lots of boosts in play this coming game week as well, which I'm sure we'll get onto later on, but that will probably affect things. So it's just making sure you're sort of comfortable with where you're at with your team, with your strategy, etc., and just sort of taking it from there, really. But yeah, so that's sort of how we did. Next thing, I'm coming back to you for the team news.
Yeah, so I've done team news for every game, every team this game week. Normally I don't, but as it's the first game of the season, there's key things we need to know. So for Birmingham, Allsop was in goal. We got the nod over Beadle. Osei Samuel played at right back. And Stansfield sort of played the 10 behind Kaigo up front. Ipswich, Davis did start. There was some doubt about his fitness. They played a 3 behind Hurst of Jack Clark on the left, Ogbene on the right, and Smodics in the 10. For Coventry, Hadji Wright was on the bench. For Hull, McBurney was on the bench. For Southampton, they lined up with a 3 at the back. Armstrong was up front. He got the nod over Downs and Archer. There was just a bit unpredictable of who would get the nod. Wrexham, they had a front 2 of Moore and Windass, and Ward was in goal. Charlton of Alafe was on the bench. Watford, no Chatfatadze. West Brom, Price did play in the 10 behind the striker. Blackburn, Dinuve did he's a defender in the game, and he played left wing. And Torf was in goal. He got the nod over Pears. For Oxford, Volks 4.5 midfielder did start. For Pompey, Bishop started after there was quite a lot of doubt. I think a lot of people thought he was going to miss out, although Murphy did miss out, who was injured. And 4 million Shaughnessy started in centre back. For Stoke, Cresswell, 4.5 million defender did start at left back, and Mbama did start up front. For Derby, Morris did start after a slow pre-season. He did start. QPR, Walsh was in goal over Nardal. They played a 3 behind Sellar of Poku, Chair, and Dembele. Preston, had Vukovic and Small wing backs, Osmajic and Smith up front. Norwich had a three at the back. Stacey and Schlupp were wing backs. Sargent started. Millwall, Ivanovic and Coburn both started. For Borough, Bryan was in goal. Eileen played right centre back. Silvera played left wing back, and they had Whittaker and Burzorg supporting Coburn. Swansea, Burgess got the nod at centre back. Sheffield United, I'm sure we'll get into this, but Reece Norton-Davis played centre backs, and they played Brooks and Barry on the wing. Bristol City, Reece was up front. McGorry and Hiroka were on wing backs. Leicester, they had El Kanouche in the 10, and Ayew was up front. Wednesday, they played a 5-3-2, and they had a couple of 4 million defenders starting. Otabeo and Palmer both started. Yeah, that's the team news. So a lot of quite cheap options did play. Whether that lasts for long, I'm not too sure. Moving forward, I think until the transfer window, I'll try and do quite a substantial team news, just because things will change weekly. But then moving forward, it'll pretty much just be fantasy relevant, I think.
Makes sense. Two thoughts from me off the back of that that sort of jump out. One of them is I've seen today Sheffield Wednesday's transfer embargo has been lifted, and they have a list of roughly 60 players that they're looking at, which, given the size of their squad, they might need to sign quite a few. I did see two names mentioned were Liam Cooper and Ben Mee. They might need a little bit more than that, particularly in the attacking areas. But we'll see how they go. That's obviously big for them now that they can bring in some players, because they were already looking light and then lost a couple in that game. So they desperately need some players in now. And I know I sort of raised it in our chat the other day, I think, but John Mousinho, just I personally, I think it's great. I said, what's underrated? Lying. Where he said, sometimes I'm going to tell you the truth, sometimes I'm going to lie. So bear that in mind when you're looking for Pompey players and like Pompey team news in the future, is that John Mousinho might be lying. This was obviously with regards to, in particular, he didn't mention Josh Murphy, but this was in particular with regards to saying that Colby Bishop was out of the game. Colby Bishop obviously then started. But just particularly with the team news going forward and thinking about that, just bear in mind that John Mousinho is willing to lie to you. Which I personally enjoyed, but I get if you're trying to work out when your player's going to play is not the most ideal thing. But yeah, so that's sort of the initial sort of takeaways from me, really. So we'll now get into the game, sort of running through game by game, and I think initially, Dan, I'm handing back to you for the Friday night opener.
Yeah, so highly anticipated game, Birmingham and Ipswich. Obviously, Birmingham coming up, Ipswich coming down. And I thought Birmingham was excellent in this game. Especially at the beginning, they started off as you would expect. The crowd was really up for it. They were sort of first to every ball, 50-50s. They had a Kyogo. He sort of pushed Greaves just as he was about to jump, which made him lose balance, and he finished well, but that was ruled out. To be honest, the ref was being a bit too fussy. I thought he was blowing up all the time. It was sort of ruining the game. Ipswich never really got into it. It took until the second half. when Birmingham did take the lead in the 55th minute, Kyogo hit the sort of the boat bar and post, and it rebounded to Stansfield, who finished it well. And then they were clearly on top, and throughout the second half, Ipswich made changes. They brought on Chaplin, Broadhead, Ashley Young, whereas they were sort of making attacking subs. Birmingham were took off their strikers, took off Damari Gray for a right back. They were going really, really defensive, and gradually Ipswich got on more and more on top. They weren't having gilt edged chances or anything, but they were gaining territory, and eventually they won a penalty. We'll discuss the penalty, but it gets given, her scores, it then kicks off. And to be honest, I think everyone wanted another 15 minutes to see what would happen. But yeah, overall, I was impressed with Birmingham. I didn't watch too much of them in League One, but they certainly look like they're capable of competing at this level. Ipswich, I thought, struggled. Their centre mids wasn't good enough. I know they have signed players throughout the week. Taylor shouldn't be starting for a team who has aspirations of getting promoted. You think about when they got promoted last time, he hardly played. He was basically just an impact player. So yeah, Angus, what did you feel about the game? Were you impressed with Birmingham? Any worries with Ipswich?
Um, well, yes and yes. But I was impressed with Birmingham, I'd say for 55 minutes. Um, the real disappointment for me, and you can debate, and I'm sure we will. You could talk about the penalty decision and everything, but I think after the goal, they didn't. They weren't involved enough. You look at a lot of the stats, and Birmingham's basically drop off a cliff as soon as they score the goal. I think they showed a stat on Sky where it was for like the 10 minutes after the goal, something like that. Birmingham had completed 2 passes. Um, they just stop playing, and then you get into those subs. And the problem with that is you then get into a situation where something like that, a header can hit an arm in the box, and all of a sudden you've drawn a game that you were definitely the better side in for almost an hour. So I think they did run out of steam to a degree. Like you saw some of those guys like Damari Gray and Keshi Anderson coming off, and they had run themselves into the ground. I think part of the issue for me was the tactical element of it's defensive players you're bringing on for those players that is inviting a little bit more pressure onto you, which by that point was already coming. Ipswich had picked things up a little bit, and um, they were just inviting them on more. It felt like at that point, so that was a little bit of a concern for me. Is like they need to, and part of it, it's the first proper game of the season. Like you're not necessarily going to be able to go for 90 minutes, but the approach in terms of them basically stopping playing after the goal when they'd been so good did concern me a bit. But I thought they were very good for those first 55 minutes. Um, and so like credit to them there. From the Ipswich side of things, yeah, it wasn't great. Like I say, Birmingham let them back in a little bit. They did force it themselves a little bit as well. In fairness, like it wasn't solely that Birmingham took their foot off the gas. Um, some of the issues you'd expect to be rectified, like I felt like Taylor was a bit of an issue in terms of it felt at times like Matasiwa, while he's adjusting, it was also trying to cover for Taylor, um, or having to cover space that sort of Taylor had left and that sort of thing. So I think Kajust coming into the team, which you would assume would happen very soon, will obviously make a big difference for them. Um, I wasn't like I forgot Ogbene was there, and part of that was just the lean they had to the left hand side. meant that it was easy to forget he was there. Thought Jack Clark was particularly well. I was going to say particularly disappointing, but actually, you could name two or three Ipswich attackers that were particularly disappointing. And I think both Sammy Smodics and George Hurst should be a bit concerned about Chuba Akpom's arrival and what it means for their place in the team, because you could easily argue that both of them could drop out of the team. But Jack Clark, I felt really disappointed in that game. Leif Davis, I thought, got into some really good positions. Thought Greaves struggled early with Kyogo, um, but like did did better as the game went on. But he certainly struggled early on. Um, Ben Johnson was just there. Um, so I think there's some things for them to work on. I think the fact that they were able to get a draw out of it will obviously be encouraging for them. Like I say, Akpom in, they're looking to add players. Um, there's the question about what will happen with. I mean, there's talk of bids for Davis. It sounds, if I had to guess, Davis is still there at the end of the window. Amari Hutchinson is a different matter, but if they do sell him, they'll be able to strengthen in the ways they probably want to with the money they get from that. So I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing. Obviously, they would have been expecting to have Jaden Philogene, who was particularly bright in pre-season for them, and he was unable to play, so that probably made a difference as well. Um, but yeah, so some concern. They'll be happy that they managed to claw their way back into the game. So it's that sort of balance. Um, but just one thing I was going to say on Ipswich, just to illustrate my point about both Sammy Smodics and George Hurst. I've got a few stats on the two here. Completed passes. Sammy Smodics completed 14 passes in the whole game, which was better than George Hurst's 8. In terms of the non-penalty XG, because obviously Hurst's is boosted significantly um, by the penalty, Sammy Smodics had a massive 0.14, George Hurst 0.13. Touches in the opposition box. George Hurst had 4, Sammy Smodics had 1. And in terms of shots, they both had 2 each in the whole game. And at least one of Sammy Smodics, I remember, was outside of the box, straight into a defender, stood basically right in front of him. Both of them were disappointing. I think there will obviously be changes, and I think it's one game and you don't want to overreact. And I think actually that Birmingham centre back partnership is good in terms of particularly Hurst's struggles. Um, But as I say, particularly when they've put in particularly underwhelming performances in game one, Chuba Akpom's arrival looms large.
So getting for fantasy purposes, we've both got Davis. I didn't. I wanted to see what Ipswich did before investing even more into them. Obviously, they had Birmingham. They've got Southampton next. Is it just a wait and see what happens with Agpon, see what happens with Philogene? Well, that's my opinion. Do you share the same thing, Angus?
Yeah, I wouldn't panic even after everything I've said. If you have George Hurst, for example, um, you also now know he's on pens, which is nice. But I think that's less of a concern. But I think anything you've got, you're going to hold and wait and see. I think anyway.
Yeah, that's fair. Do we know he's on pens? Because Jack Clark wasn't on the pitch, or Sammy Smodics wasn't on the pitch.
I mean, I'm assuming there, but no, we don't know. Also, I would like to address. I think it was one of the centre backs said to George Hurst that his pen was shit. Um, given how early Ryan Alsop showed which way he was going to go, the fact that George Hurst made sure he just side-footed it to the other side without putting it in any danger of missing, beyond sort of any comment you want to make about any penalty that goes in the goal is a good pen. It doesn't have to be in the corner if you know the keeper's going the other way. So I just thought, I heard him say that. I thought, well, that's a ridiculous comment.
Yeah, that is. Birmingham wise, like I said, I was pretty impressed. Obviously, they've been hyped up. Um, any fantasy there, Angus? Kyogo looked pretty lively. Stansfield, I think he probably will be on pens. I think he was pretty sure he was on pens last year. Um, it looks like, um, as expected, uh, I say Samuel was right back. Maybe against teams where they're clear favourites, we might see more of him attacking wise. Any on your watch list, Angus?
I think after about 8 minutes of this game, I wanted Kyogo. Uh,
Yeah,
and it was really nice watching him succeed without sort of it setting off some sort of panic reaction in my brain. That was quite nice. Um, Stansfield, very interesting. I'm a little bit jealous of the people that already have Stansfield. Um, Keshi Anderson, I think, is an interesting one. I was actually impressed with him and sort of what he was able to offer. And the other one for me is Cochrane. I thought
yeah.
he put some really good deliveries into the box. We saw him on some of the set pieces. So he's the other one that's sort of on radar for me as well. So probably overall, it's probably those four. I think until I see someone like Asai Samuel attack a bit more, I think that's sort of where I'd be looking.
Obviously, you got Laird for competition on the right side. Now they might bring someone in, but Cochrane looks like the only left back at the minute. Um, I'm not sure he's quite as attacking as the right backs, but as you said, even if he's dropping, not getting down to the byline or anything, even if they're dropping it back and he's whipping the ball in from like 18-yard box, it could get a few assists. So
Yeah.
yeah, overall I was positive on Birmingham, little wary on Ipswich, but this pretty much happens all the time with the teams coming down. They're losing players, they're trying to sign players, whereas Birmingham look squad just feels more settled already. They got a lot of their business done. So Angus, let's move on to the next game.
Yeah, and another tale of a relegated team against promoted team. I actually really enjoyed this game. Southampton 2, Wrexham 1. Sort of Saturday lunchtime game. I'm gonna say, and like in a couple of group chats, people will know what I'm gonna say. I spent a lot, particularly the first half, talking about how Southampton's setup didn't really work. Um, they looked unfamiliar. They went with a back three: Edwards, Stevens, and Kwasi. Sugawara and Wellington as the sort of wing backs, Downs and Charles in midfield, Fraser and Robinson in support of Adam Armstrong. Um, so in terms of like the thoughts there, I will come to Wrexham, but just a couple of thoughts I had. Like I say, back three, it looked like they weren't exactly comfortable playing it. Their spacing wasn't quite right. The number of times Keeper Moore, who is not exactly like fleet of foot, was able to pick the gaps, running the channels, running through the gaps in the defence. Like, bit of concern there. Ronnie Edwards had a really tough game. Initially, he was doing all right up against Kiefer Moore. Then he seemed to just start panicking and fouling him. Seemed to be all over the place. I'll come to it later on, but the penalty he gave away just daft. Um, and so he had a really rough day, I thought. And the other thing for me is the attacking setup just didn't didn't look right. Fraser and Robinson in support of Armstrong. Like they left out Archer, they left out Downs. Two guys who had featured significantly for them in pre-season and done well, and you leave them out. I mean, Mateus Fernandez was on the bench. Like, obviously, I mean, when you look at it, and they're Manning, Wood, Fernandez, Matsuki, Downs, Stewart, Brereton Diaz, and Archer on the bench. That's an incredible bench, but it did feel like a couple of those should have been in the starting lineup. Um, but it's one game and they ultimately won it, but it didn't look quite right. And I do think it was a change up from what they will play more often than not. On the Wrexham side, obviously the 3-5-2. Bennett started at right wing back rather than Longman, and Windass and Moore in attack with Smith and Hardy on the bench. I think with the two sort of more notable things are Danny Ward in goal. I think a lot of people expected Okonkwo to play. He was in the predicted lineups. Unfortunately, I saw someone who I think had played possibly the ideal Jeepers Keepers game week 1 had played it on Okonkwo and Charles. Um, and if you think about the saves that Danny Ward made in this game, it would have been incredible. So it's unfortunate because that's a great strategy as well. So, um, but Wrexham started off the much brighter team. As I say, Southampton were struggling. They got the penalty. Ronnie Edwards, I have no idea what he's doing. I also don't understand how he's annoyed about it. You just pushed him in the back. Like, I'm not sure about the red card. I don't think he was right about to shoot. He was getting ready to shoot, but there was another player there. I think there's just enough doubt to save Edwards from getting sent off personally. But I also think if he'd been sent off, in part just for the stupidity of the challenge, he couldn't have had too many arguments. Um, and yeah, it was a struggle for Southampton, I think, throughout that first half. But they did pick it up, and they did have some chances in that half. Um, Second half, they obviously pushed on a lot more. You could also feel Wrexham tire a little bit, and Southampton, really did keep pushing at them. And credit to them in that regard. And obviously, the key change ultimately was them bringing on obviously, it was in the 72nd minute, but Ryan Manning, who scored a banger of a free kick, excellent free kick. Um, Real question, I think it was Dobson who makes the foul, and I think it was Shea Charles. Absolutely no need to make it. Like, unlikely to get the ball ahead of him, sort of fouls him. You don't necessarily expect that, but just don't even give him the opportunity. And then it's Ryan Manning who puts the ball across. It gets a little flick off Damien Downs. And there's Jack Stevens, like all good strikers, at the back post to finish it off the bar. 96th minute, incredible way to finish. Um, and yeah, it was just really entertaining. Um, and I think Wrexham impressed. I think they more ran out of steam rather than the Birmingham issue where it felt like they ran out of steam after sort of shutting up shop. Wrexham, I felt like just ran out of steam. Um, but they will cause problems for teams. Southampton, I think there is an adjustment period. They will be figuring things out to a degree. They had sort of three players who didn't play due to transfer speculation. Like, this, to a degree, will sort itself out. Um, Also worth mentioning, in added time, Ryan Hardy was through and Gavin Bazunu made it what turned out to be an absolutely vital save. So it was a good game for him. Um, Particularly as there's sort of ongoing conversations because they let Ramsdale go and potentially need a goalkeeper of some sort, what level of goalkeeper they're looking for. So I think it was important for him to have a good game, which he did. But um, I don't know how much of this game you saw, Dan, or what your thoughts are on the assets on either side in this.
So, un- unfortunately, I was watching Luton play because they were kicking off at the same time and we only won 2-0. I asked before kickoff what game you were watching, and I wanted to watch this game. But obviously, with Luton playing, I didn't. I've only caught the brief highlights and looked at the stats and everything. Southampton had 4 xg. Like, is this an attack Wrexham? Because
I I
I
don't think so. I think part of that is being carried by two or three chances. Like, I think Jack Stevens' goal at the end is like over 0.7 xg. So when you think about the proportion of that, it does start coming down a little bit. Like I say, I think part of it was like Southampton had like 5 or 6 attackers on by the end, and we're just sort of like throwing things at them. So it's not necessarily that, and Wrexham will continue to bring players in as well, which I think will help. But I think Southampton might like, if I were to take anything away, it's more that once they start working things out, Southampton could be a really good attack to be in.
Because we said this on the preview pods, or when the game dropped, that when we were looking at the Southampton squad, it has some depth.
Yeah.
And everyone's just thinking Ipswich are just going to just walk this league. But when you look at that Southampton deck, especially attacking wise, I'm not so sure. Obviously, first game for Will still and everything. He's going to take a while to adjust. They've got two good centre mids in Downs and Charles that they'll run games by themselves. And you listed all the attacking players. So yeah, I'm intrigued with Southampton. Unfortunately, I didn't have any of their players. Not the great fixtures, obviously Ipswich game week 2. I do have two West Brom, and they go away to Wrexham, and they're attacking players in Fellows and Hegbo. So I can't take them out when they've just conceded 4 XG. So hopefully that pays off. Fantasy wise, is it for Southampton wait a little while until, especially after Ipswich, and hopefully it settles down a bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think it will be hard, and if you're really looking for someone, I wouldn't necessarily say it would be the next game, although maybe if you're particularly concerned about the way Ipswich played, I think there would be a very strong case for Ryan Manning to come into the team. So there's an element of that. I thought Adam Armstrong wasn't great. If you've got him, I wouldn't necessarily panic. I thought that, Robinson, the young lad, can't make up my mind whether he played well or struggled a bit. But how exactly they work out that attacking rotation, in terms of who's going to be the starters and who's going to sort of be the at least primary backups or the second wave of players, I think that puts you off enough to start with. But I think if you've got someone in there, particularly someone who started, so if you've got like a Sugawara or an Adam Armstrong, you're probably keeping them. But otherwise, yeah, I think you want to wait and see how it shakes out.
And Wrexham, obviously Moore, it looks like he's injured now, isn't it? So probably Hardy comes in, do you reckon?
I would assume so. I felt for Keith Moore, it was one of these weird, sort of impact ones where ball gets sort of trapped there and it jars his knee, I think. So it remains to be seen what that prognosis is. If it is sort of if it does force him out, then obviously Hardy can come in. I'd you know I feel like I say this every season, but keep an eye on Josh Windass. Um, he's basically playing in the front two. He's playing, I think, slightly off, but might as well have been a front two.
And he's a
Um,
midfielder.
yeah, and on penalties. So he's definitely one to keep an eye on.
What about Wrexham's wing backs? Anything from them?
I think it's tough to say because they both have two plausible players on each side. So for now, it would probably be a sort of stay away for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anything else, or
I
shall
don't think so. I
I?
think I've covered quite a lot from that. So I'll hand back to you for the next game that we're going to cover.
Yeah, so my second game is Norwich versus Millwall. Norwich, obviously, the first match under Liam Manning after he took Bristol City to the playoffs last year, and Millwall really impressed transfer business. I think during during the summer. Norwich played a three at the back, which I mentioned in the team news. Schlupp and Stacey were the wing backs. Cernak and Fonson supported Sargent. Millwall, as I mentioned, they had both strikers playing, although it looks like Coburn was sort of playing a 10 position with Aziz and Negley on the wings. Looking at the game, it's a pretty open game. The goal scoring started in the second half. There was 2 goals in 5 minutes. Good work for Crammer, who was playing right back, put it across, and Negley's finished. He had a spell at the end of the season in January to settle in, and I wonder if we're going to see how good he is this season. Pretty good option, good value. And then Norwich equalise through Sargent. The goalie basically just hit him as he was trying to block the ball, and it just went in. I joked in the chat, goal of the season contender. And then there was subs for Millwall. They brought on Langstaff, who had quite a lot of hype last year going into the season, done well with the lower levels, scored quite a few in pre-season, and he got the winner here. Doughty with a good ball down the line. Langstaff clean through, finished really well, bottom corner. And then they ran out winners 2-1. As someone who had Doughty, I was pretty happy. Wasn't too sure because he hasn't got the best of fixtures to start with. But then it's just Doughty. He just gets so many key passes and things like that. I saw people benching him. Like, how can you bench Alfie Doughty? Oh dear. 3 key passes in the game, created a big chance. Straight in the team, an assist, 11 points. Angus, anything from this game? Were you surprised with the formation of Norwich? I know Manning played it quite a lot at Bristol City, but I'm not sure they were expecting 3 at the back straight away.
No, and I was surprised to see that. I think particularly if you looked at some of the way they played in pre-season, you wouldn't have expected to see it. And I don't think it was one of those where you would say, "Oh, and it showed." But I think, it's because I think that it was probably a relatively even game, all things told. But it was a little bit of a surprise that they produced that. And does it help their players sort of feel like better picks? I'm not so convinced. Um, but we'll see in that regard. But I think aside from Josh Sargent, really, I wouldn't be looking at Norwich.
I think that's fair. Away to Portsmouth, we know how good Portsmouth were at home last year. Home to Borough, which I think we mentioned we're not worried about Borough, but we're a bit uncertain on how well they're going to start. Although they did win, and then away to Blackburn, so it's not terrible, but I think I need to see more. If Sargent stays, he's going to be an option throughout the season. He's probably the best striker in the league. But yeah, I was more impressed with Millwall in this game. I think I mentioned in pre-season, I thought they've done some good business. You always get that one team who no one really suspects getting the playoffs, or maybe non-championship fans are a bit shocked. And I do wonder if Millwall could be that team. They look solid. Well, they're normally solid. You got Kramer and Doughty as the fullbacks. Cooper and Tanganga, obviously, he's got that release clause, which I cannot believe a Premier League club haven't paid. Was it about 2 million to get him?
Yeah,
I mean, he's homegrown as well. Like, even if you keep him for 1 year, you probably sell him for 10 million back to, or 5 to 10 million back to the Championship anyway. So I'm surprised no one's taken that. Um, And as I mentioned, Aziz and Nagy on the wings. And we know how much you like Ivanovic up front. So, any standout options, Angus? A few on the watch list?
yeah. So I think there's obviously Doughty. Thought Kramer looked bright last season as well. So it's not necessarily being like, oh, he can cover Doughty or he'll do the same, because Doughty will clearly offer more in terms of that crossing element, the key pass element. But I do think Kramer is potentially interesting. And then Negley, I liked sort of a sort of little bit of him last season. Looked like he was growing into things. Looks like he has a little bit about him. So I'll have an eye on him. And then obviously Ivanovic. I think if their start had been slightly better, he would have been in my team. But I just didn't quite like their start, so he didn't make it. But particularly once they get through this initial tough run, um, I'd be surprised if I wasn't then buying him.
If he's still at Millwall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like Negley, 6'5". I'm sure we're going to, especially in the next few, talk about a few players around this 7 to 6 bracket where I think we could have a lot of options throughout the season. But yeah, I think that's me covered with Millwall and Norwich.
So next one for me is Sheffield United against Bristol City. So obviously, this was sort of interesting. Scott Twine kicked things off, an exceptional free kick. Particularly sort of seeing the Manning free kick and then the Twine free kick. It was certainly a treat if you like that sort of thing. Um, Tyrese Campbell equalised, and you thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be interesting. Then Ross McCrory, really nice finish actually on coming up on the overlap to make it 2-1. Um, and then it just sort of got away from Sheffield United at the start of the second half. Um, Mehmeti scores in the first minute of the second half. Twine scores a deflected goal in the 51st minute, and you're almost just hoping at that point that it doesn't get any worse. Um, Thankfully for them, it didn't. There are obviously some issues they've had, particularly in terms of recruitment. Um, Bindon and Norrington Davis. That's not a centre back partnership. Um, I thought Barry looked bright, um, but I think just they need to work on that into play, particularly in the attacking areas. Thought Brooks struggled a little bit. Um, like Campbell, I thought looked decent. You'd expect to see a bit more of sort of Tom Cannon, and um, you know they they'll look to sort of play him a little bit more, I'm sure. Um, but it's a concern, and it's something to monitor. I'll briefly touch later on the Middlesbrough Swansea game, but I think having watched that game, I can't sell Burrows before he plays Swansea. But I think it's going to be something that I have a very keen eye on after the way that game went, and they're going to have to recruit, particularly defensively, um, to sort of address that. On the Bristol City side, I think for a lot of people who have Bristol City points on their bench, don't despair, because a lot of people have their Bristol City points on the bench. There was a lot of thought of like have at least one Bristol City player in get this game out of the way, and then they've got an incredible run. I've seen quite a bit of McCrory around, Mehmeti around, Reese around, and I think if you've got those guys, you're feeling very good after game one.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because I think attacking wise, I thought Sheffield United were quite good. I thought they were linking up well. O'Hare looked good. A great play for Campbell to score. As you've said, Barry looked quite bright cutting in. He's done that for Stockport in League One and League Two. But every time Bristol City countered, like they were so easy. They were getting really good chances. We've mentioned for a while about Scott Twine, and when is he going to break out? Could this be it? Great free kick. We saw him do that a number of times over the last few years, and even when he's not been playing that well, he ends up scoring. So they've got a lot of attacking options, especially that front three of Mehmeti and Twine behind Reese. Reese hasn't been great the last couple of seasons. He was injured for one. But the season before that, he scored quite a lot for a Preston side, where I'm wondering if this Bristol City side's a bit more attacking, he could do well. Me not having a Bristol City player is a little bit worrying, although they play Charlton. They'll be at home to Charlton, and Charlton will not be as open as Sheffield United will be. So yeah, I think I'm just going to risk going without him again, I think. But yeah, jumping back to Sheffield United, that centre-back partnership, I think Bindon will be okay if he, funnily enough, if he played maybe alongside Robinson, who I know there's speculation with Wrexham, and also he's been injured, but because he's highly rated. But Reece Norton-Davis is never, ever a centre-back in the Championship.
Especially a centre back in a back four. You could
Yeah,
maybe squeeze him in like
yeah,
left centre
left of the
back in a
three.
three,
Yeah.
but centre back in a back four.
And when you've got Burrows, and I saw that back four, I was like, uh-oh. Like, I wasn't overly impressed. And as you've mentioned, he's 7 million. And if that, he done well last year because they kept a lot of clean sheets. If they're not keeping clean sheets, I know he's quite attacking and can get points going forward. But yeah, I'm not sure that 7 million is going to be value. But yeah, overall impressed with Bristol City. Impressed to somewhat degree with Sheffield United, especially going forward. But I'm staying away, I think, for a while.
Yeah, I agree. Particularly on Sheffield United, I think if you've got something, you're probably holding it for another game, and then you're reevaluating. Bristol City, anything you've got, you're probably quite happy you've got at this point.
Right, so my final game is, and I'm surprised we're talking about this game. I'm not sure I'd have picked it going into the week. I thought it was going to be quite low scoring, but Stoke 3, Derby 1. For Stoke, lined up in a 4-2-3-1. Not too many surprises. Pretty much as expected. Mubama did get the nod up front, but it was Derby who took the lead. Colton Morris, it's amazing what a fit Colton Morris can do. Great finish after good work from Blackett Taylor, who spent a lot of last season out injured. And then it sort of kicked Stoke into gear. Lewis Baker with a typical Lewis Baker goal. Sorba Thomas basically passing the ball on the edge of the 18-yard box, and he killed it bottom corner. They scored a second. This was a brilliant header from Mbama. Headed sort of going backwards, but he headed it down where it came from. That was a Seko assist, and then they wrapped it up. So Donnelly, who had come on, basically went through, won the ball, and squared it to Sorba Thomas, who couldn't really miss, to make it 3-1. So we had a goal and assist for Sorba Thomas. We saw what he done at this level with Huddersfield. And a goal from Mbama, who quite a highly rated potential at Man City, West Ham, and then Man City. So Angus, I know you've got Cresswell. Annoyingly, I did have at some point Sorba Thomas and Mbama in my team. A bit frustrated, more so Mbama, because I just didn't know if he was going to start. But yeah, overall, Angus, are Stoke going to get in the playoffs?
I think it was quite funny because it's one of those things where obviously the whole game counts the same and everything. Like, I'm not sort of trying to take away from an opening day win. But it's something you have to bear in mind with something like this. You look at it, you see Stoke 1-3-1, you think this is great. 94 minutes gone, it was 1-1, and Stoke had like 10 shots in total. In terms of thinking, oh yeah, this was some great attacking performance. Not saying there are no positives there, and I think you can see some of the players there, and you can see some of the stats there, and the likes of Sorba Thomas and Mabama do look like good picks. Cresswell, we'd seen in pre-season taking some of the set pieces. It sounded like he wasn't really doing that in this game, and it was mostly, if not all, Sorba Thomas, uh, which would be a little bit of a disappointment from that perspective. Um, but not necessarily totally unexpected. But I think, there were a few people who played sort of follow the leader with Stoke players game week 1, which is disgusting.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Um, and if you've got particularly Thomas and Mubama on that, you're probably pretty happy. Um, I think they clearly hung in a game that was sort of a tough game. It's going to be a tough game. Um, and there's some reasons for positives there. And I think in previous years it's a game that Stoke wouldn't have won. Um, but it's still a little bit of a watch and wait for me. There was the first game, particularly if you were low on Derby, and then it's I think a little bit of a mixed bag. Um, so sort of remains to be seen when it comes to their assets in terms of well, it's Sheffield Wednesday, sorry, it's the first two. They also play Sheffield Wednesday away, and then sort of they play Southampton, West Brom, Birmingham. So it's like you were probably looking at your Stoke assets as a um, 2 game week play. And I know some people who are looking at, for example, follow the leader in game week 1 and then away days in game week 2 who went with the Stoke players. They're probably happy right now. I think a lot of people, unless you're looking at a very short term punt, probably aren't looking at Stoke players.
Yeah, and I think that's why I didn't go for a Stoke player in the end. I thought the Derby game was going to be pretty even, and basically it was until the last injury time. I thought it was going to be 1-0, 1-1, and obviously they've wrapped it up towards the end. And that Sheffield Wednesday game is the big game. And I know you're going to get onto that game afterwards. So yeah, I think I'm a bit annoyed that I haven't gone Sorba Thomas, just because we know how you get points in this, and Sorba Thomas could do nothing in the game and end up with 3 or 4 key passes and just get bonus. So
Yeah.
I'm a bit annoyed about that. But yeah, it'll be all right. What I do like is having someone like Jamie Donnelly coming off the bench, who's like quite creative, and we saw that at Leyton Orient last year. I know Manu was not happy coming off off the pitch. But yeah, I think we'll see how they evolve. Obviously, big pressure. Anyone who's playing Sheffield Wednesday at the minute are expected to win, and they're not going to make it as easy as I think everyone thought it was going to be. Derby, I think they've got to sign a couple more players like Birmingham. Who wasn't in the squad, who they've signed from America. Morris, if they build a team around him, we saw what he done at Luton. Initially, he'll score goals if he's fit. So yeah, nothing to worry about with Derby. I think they'll do all right. But yeah, Stoke, God, top two.
I'm not getting suckered in. Too many times before I've sort of been positive on Stoke, and it's died quickly. Now that they've won a game, I'm not going to do the opposite. Um, but yeah, as mentioned, I will cover off our last sort of feature game, which is Leicester 2, Sheffield Wednesday 1. Leicester, there wasn't too much unexpected, particularly once it was confirmed that James Justin was fit. Um, I think, maybe the fact that Harry Winks wasn't in the team was probably the only surprise beyond that. Certainly from the friendlies, it seemed like Jordan Ayew was slightly ahead of Patson Daka by the end, so I don't think we could be too surprised to see that. On the Sheffield Wednesday side, it was quite clear that they were sort of struggling for numbers. They put a not bad side out, but you looked at the bench and it became very thin very quickly. Um, Thought they started off reasonably. Leicester did have some chances of their own, but they sort of hit the woodwork via a good save from Stolarczyk from Nathaniel Chalabar, and then it was Nathaniel Chalabar who did open the scoring, obviously via a deflection off Skip. Um, I also have to hold my hands up. After that, I was somewhat sort of, you know, sarcastically mocking the half-time change of Harry Winks for Oliver Skip, but it did actually make a meaningful difference. Um, the Before I get on to the first goal, because I think it naturally flows on, I think one thing that really hampered Leicester for the first 52, 53 minutes was this baffling idea that Jordan Ayew should be on set pieces. Nothing about Jordan Ayew's set pieces in that game suggested that it was a good idea for Jordan Ayew to be on set pieces. Nothing really in Jordan Ayew's career suggested that it would be a good idea for Jordan Ayew to be on set pieces, and it didn't really work. And they scored from the first or second set piece after they took Jordan Ayew off set pieces and put Bilal El Khanous on set pieces. Um, in this case, it was a low ball in that actually went all the way through to Yannick Vestergaard, who finished it quite well, but to make it 1-1. And then it was a El Khanous corner that was headed in by Wout Fast to ultimately win the game late on. Before that, Barry Bannon had been sent off, and I found it quite funny, his complaints. And I think there was some punditry from Ryan Lowe particularly questioning the first yellow and whether it had to be given, and then whether the second yellow had to be given the challenge. Where my personal opinion was the only debate on the second ban and challenge was whether it was a second yellow or a straight red. And I think it was second yellow, like I don't think it was a red. When you go up with your studs that high on someone's leg, like you're getting booked. And to go into a challenge like that, I know that Barry Bannon is a sort of heart on his sleeve player and everything, but when you have got the booking for um, descent, you then have to factor in what you do accordingly. And I think going into a challenge like that wasn't doing that, and so I don't think they can have too many complaints about that. But yeah, El Khanous, funnily enough, much better set piece taker than Jordan Ayew. Um, Two centre backs pop up with the goals. Those on Fatawu and Mavadidi probably feeling quite disappointed. Jordan Ayew managed to get bonus by keeping on shooting at the goalkeeper. Um, but given that he's playing up front and might well stay on those set pieces, uh, particularly in the it sounds like El Khanous has a lot of Premier League suitors and so may well be on his way. He's probably a decent pick. Fatawu, I thought looked really good. For a while, Sheffield Wednesday's only way to combat him was just to foul him. Um, Mavididi quieter, but did have one or two chances. It looked a little bit like growing pains for them, and you'd expect it to get a bit better. But um, I thought Sheffield Wednesday gave a really good account of themselves. I thought Sheffield Wednesday fans gave a really good account of themselves. But ultimately, you did sort of feel that sense of inevitability, particularly as the second half went on, that Leicester were going to find a way through. It took longer than expected for the second goal, but it wasn't necessarily a surprise when they did ultimately find it.
Yeah, I agree. Like you mentioned, Sheffield Wednesday, I thought they'd done really well in the first half. Um, and you can look at their lineup, and apart from Otabeo, maybe Childs, and Cadamartri, it's solid pros who um, know how to play championship football or league football. So um, they done quite well. And if they weren't playing someone like a Leicester, they could have got a draw from this. And I think it'll be frustrating that they conceded both goals from set pieces. Um, I mentioned to you that I might be taking a little bit of a flutter on a Stoke centre back. I think I like next week. But yeah, Leicester really frustrating. I went for Mavididi and Fatu, so not ideal. Um, it did make me laugh with IU. Like everything was basically just going straight at the keeper's arms. And because they weren't winning, he ended up playing the whole game. Whereas I thought, going into the game, they'll probably be 2 up, and they'll take him off for Daka. So that's the reason why I didn't go for him. But yeah, pretty similar to Southampton and Ipswich. I think they might lose a couple of players before things settle down. They'll probably bring in some as well. So yeah, we'll see. I'm on those two. They've got Preston. It's going to be hard to get rid of either of them before Preston.
Yeah, I mean, particularly for me, particularly Fatawu, I thought he looked really good, really sharp. We'll see how it goes, but that was one that sort of really jumped out throughout the game as an option. As I say, I'll be disappointed to lose El Kanous, but I did think it might only be for a game. Um, so that's the sort of feature games. We've gone over an hour, which our best intentions was to keep it to like an hour, hour and a quarter, but it's game week one. Like we knew it would go a bit longer. Um, in terms of thoughts on the other games that we haven't covered, I'll briefly talk about. I did watch the Middlesbrough against Swansea game. It wasn't the highest quality game. I was actually really impressed with Sammy Silvera at left wing back. I thought he was one of their better players. Um, I did say to someone as well, did a lot of the defensive work, which is a good way of staying in the team for in a situation like this. And there has been talk of them signing someone to play left wing back, but it does also feel at the moment like that person is still then going to have to displace Silvera. Whitaker had a couple of chances. Hackney played and looked decent. Um, Dale Fry showed a little bit of what they were missing last season when he didn't play much, and obviously got the goal from the set piece. I thought Alfie Jones looked very good in the back three. Solbrin looks a solid option in goal for them. So if they're going to be remotely solid defensively going forward, that's potentially a nice keeper option looking further down the line. Um, Part of the reason I said about Burrows earlier is Swansea really didn't create much. They really struggled to create. Um, and like there were a couple of shots. There was a Ronaldo one into the side netting, and we'll see how it goes sort of going forward. But I was a little bit concerned from that perspective in this game. I thought Middlesbrough did a decent job, but sort of how much Swansea struggled in attack is what leads me, particularly with Burrows, to say I'm going to need to hold him for that game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm going to talk about Charlton Watford. Um, or as I'm calling them, Luton Athletic, because they've signed half of our team. Um, but yeah, winner in the 94th minute. Um, I've been pretty bullish on. I think Charlton will stay up, mainly down to Nathan Jones. As expected, they played this three at the back, Rob Apter at right wing back. And they're going to rely a lot on set pieces, and the goal came from a set piece. It fell to Nibs, who scored the winner in the 94th minute, and got to love Nathan Jones' celebrations after the Watford fans have been giving it all game. So yeah, I enjoyed that one.
I've got just a couple of things to hit off the back of that. One, sort of credit to, I guess I'm just going to say Evil Pandor for, I thought Hull did decently, but obviously particularly that keeper getting an 11 pointer to start off the season. And more importantly, the first goalkeeper assist of the season. Daniel Everson with a great ball in behind for Osmajic, but we have our first goalkeeper assist of the season in game week 1 for Daniel Everson. So that was a fun detail there.
Yep. Just to round off, West Brom won 1-0 and Pompey won 1-0. We'll talk about different teams throughout the season, go more in depth into them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you've got Price or Hegebo, you're quite pleased with them combining for the goal. If you've got Darnell Furlong, you're less pleased about him getting sent off. So we'll get on to the questions. Um, we've got a few questions on Twitter. Thank you to everyone who sent one in. These are in no particular order, so it's not sort of first come, first served or anything. It's just how they appear under the tweet for me. Chris Hermitage has said, how would you rank Ipswich assets now, and which three would you be most likely to get?
I think Davis is still number one. I think
Yeah,
it's tricky now because Clark's so expensive. Like, is he the second best option?
I think I'd go Davis and Hurst, and it's a little bit of a cop out, but it depends on Philogene's injury status. Because if Philogene's going to be back, he's the other one I'd want.
What about Ashley Young?
No,
He's going to get in this team though, right back over Johnson, surely.
I mean that's certainly possible, but I still wouldn't want Ashley.
He's on some set pieces now.
Yeah, even so, it's not convincing me on Ashley.
That's fair enough.
FPL Flair has asked anything to note in terms of unexpected starters, players on set pieces we didn't expect, etc. I think you covered some of those off in the team news at the start. Really, unexpected starter, I guess, to go back to the sort of bit at the start. Colby Bishop,
Yeah.
but that's for different reasons. um, Ski House 78. Should we just give fraud of the season to John Mousinho for Bishop Murphy trolling? Then is Isaac Price the obvious replacement for Murphy? Um, I think there's going to be a lot of people looking at Isaac Price as an option, particularly if you've got
5.5, yeah. And
yeah
a 10, yeah.
yeah if you've got issues like an injury, if you're someone like me who's looking at El Canoes potentially being gone by game week 2, like that it's going to appeal getting someone like Price in. It's hard to argue with that. Whether he'd be this like the definite one, you can sort of question, but he has to be right up there, really.
Yeah, it's weird that, like we mentioned a bit, you've got Twine and Sorba Thomas million more. Yeah, I'm not sure, but they do have Wrexham, so I'm intrigued to see how he does. If Wrexham are as open, which they probably won't be, him playing as a 10 against Wrexham could be pretty good. Yeah, he's definitely an option moving forward, especially at that.
Yeah,
He could be fifth midfielder easily, and especially with the forwards aren't exactly great at the minute.
yeah,
Yeah, having a fifth midfielder of price is looking quite a good option, I'd say.
yeah. And I mean, if you wanted another sort of punt that I'll throw out there, if El Canus does leave this week, it sounds like the most likely player to come into the team would be Monga, the young lad who looked very
6 million.
bright when he came on. 6 million in the game. He could be one to punt. Uh, Roger OST Gaffer runner up said thanks for your work. Will this be the season when Twine finally fulfills his potential? I hope so. I remember going back years where I was sort of like trying to buy. I think I've bought Scott Twine. It feels like almost every season he's been in the league at least once. Um, and it would be really nice if this was finally the year.
I think the system could suit him. Have those 2 10s behind a proper target man in Reese.
Yeah,
Could work well. Um, yeah, and his free kicks are so good as well. Could do. He's got to stay fit though. He's had a few
yeah,
problems with injury. That's another thing. But yeah, if Mehmeti and Twine both could be really good options this season.
definitely. AD Tour was really impressed with Bristol City at the weekend. Do you think they can keep that up, and who are their best assets for Gaffr? I think we've generally covered that. It's wait and see, but they have an incredible fixture run, so it could go on for a little bit. I think you're primarily looking at McCrory, Twine, Mehmeti, and Reese. If you want to look at a couple of other options, you can, but I think those feel like the main ones to pick from at this point.
Yeah. Like I mentioned when we were discussing the game, I do think, although on paper you got Charlton at home, Derby away, Hull at home, Wednesday away, those teams are going to be teams that defend first. So that are they going to be are Twine and Mehmeti going to get quite as much space? If they go one up, then they will get space, but it's can they get their first goal in the game to get them space? Otherwise, I'm not sure. They might struggle to break teams down, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly possible. Um, Non-stop FPL worrying for Sheffield United or just a freak result? Bit
I'm
of
worried.
both.
Yeah, let's let's be honest. If I see Reece Norton Davis at centre back again, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm back in the handicap on whoever they're playing. I think.
yeah. I mean, I think there's some concerns there, but yes, I think it's a little bit of a freak result. A little bit of you can explain with like some of the defensive personnel, etc. Like I think, we wait and see, but it's probably a little bit of both there. And a final question from FPL Commander. Archer need to be changed already, and who should I go for? He has Stansfield and a 4.5 fodder up front with no money available. Well, the good thing with someone like Archer is he's priced quite high, so there's a lot of places you can go to. I mean, we've mentioned Reese. We've mentioned in terms of thinking about sort of players that are down from Archer. I mean, we've mentioned Hurst. We've mentioned Reese. Mentioned Hegabo. We've mentioned like Mubama. So it depends how short term or not you're thinking, but I don't know if there's anyone from that list you particularly like or anyone else you'd like to add, Dan.
I think fixture wise, if you're coming down, is probably Reese. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, I don't know. How did Archer play when he came on, Angus?
think it was just a bit chaotic at that point. So like they'd thrown on, like they had sort of Stewart and Archer and Downs and sort of Fraser and Robinson sort of on the pitch. So it was a little bit sort of chaotic. So couldn't read too much into his performance really.
Yeah, but as he hasn't started in game week 1, it's you probably have to move him.
Yeah, I mean the other one, if you're going to talk about fixtures, that I'd mention is sort of Hegabo, just in terms of plays Wrexham game week 2, has a home game against Portsmouth, like
Yeah,
plays Stoke, plays Derby, like there is a run of fixtures there. As does Reese, but I think it's just like sort of another one to highlight if we're talking about guys with fixtures.
yeah, that's fair.
So that's all the questions. Thank you to everyone again who sent us those. Hopefully this has all been useful for you. Um, Dan has informed me that he will be on holiday next week. So unless I work something else out, there won't be a game week 2 review. Um, there might be sort of an abridged version I do. We'll see how it goes. Might get someone else on again. We'll let you know in due course. I'll try and make sure there's something for you guys following game week 2, particularly as we've got sort of potentially more learnings as there's League Cup in midweek as well. But we'll see how it goes in that regard. Yeah, I think that's everything. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Dan?
No, I think we've covered a lot of it. Um, that's one down, Angus.
Yeah, absolutely.
45 game weeks ago.
Yeah. Um, and it's what we love. We love it being back. Like, we'll see how it goes the rest of the season. But all that's left for me to say is thank you for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.